Hi everybody, welcome again to the second edition of the Successful Man Seminar. This is a seminar that will explore all the facets of success in a man's life, from career to family, marriage and relationships, how to raise children, how to deal with problems, and how to get more spiritual and closer to God. This class started last week, and I'll do a review for those of you that didn't tune in. Now, this is a class only for men, so I ask that if anyone here is a woman who's viewing it, please turn the video off, or feel free to forward the video to someone else. This is advice only for men, so a woman should not really listen to this advice. This class is based on the teachings of my beloved rabbi and teacher, Rabbi Shalom Arush, and I strongly encourage that you read his books, The Garden of Emunah and The Garden of Peace. These are books that really teach you a lot about life, and they do it in such a simplicity, but the teachings are so powerful that they've really changed the lives of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, me included, which is the reason why I thought it was so important to create this seminar. So, The Successful Man is a seminar that really applies to really any person. You don't have to have any kind of spiritual stature. You don't have to be extremely religious or unreligious. In fact, this is a class that can apply to a person of any religion. It can apply to a person of any ethnicity, because the teachings are truly universal. And if we look at success, we talked last week about what the conventional definition of success, that being of a man who he's got material success, he's got a great career, makes a lot of money, has a lot of beautiful toys like houses and a beautiful wife. Yeah, he has has all these trappings, and yet we find that this is really not what success is about. Certainly not the kind of success that we're going to talk about. You find a lot of examples of people that have all these things, and yet inside of them, there's something really missing, which is happiness, meaning, and that's something that is not something you can just acquire by the conventional sense. So, we'll define again what success is for this type of seminar. A successful man, in the context that we're going to discuss here, is someone who has God with him all the time. He knows that God is behind everything good that comes to him. He knows that God is his Father who loves him, wants to give him everything. But he wants you to make the efforts. He wants you to work on yourself, to rectify all the flaws that you come into this world with, so that you can reach your full potential. So you'll go through life and you'll have all kinds of situations come upon you, ups and downs, but they're all there, perfectly orchestrated for you to really improve yourself. A successful man is someone who has complete faith that God does everything for the good. Everything. There's no situation out there that is bad. A successful man is someone who is thankful to God because he knows that nothing that he gets is really by the sweat of his hands, by his intellect. It's a free gift. It's something that God really gives to him. A successful person, a successful man is someone who's really happy with his lot in life. At any particular point, he is happy with what he has. He is ambitious, but at the same time, he's happy with exactly what God has given him, because this is exactly what he needs right here and now. And a successful man is someone who does live in a marital context, has a marriage that is happy, a marriage in which he has complete respect for his wife. He never criticizes her. He only has eyes for her and nobody else. and he looks forward always to growing with his wife, his half soulmate. A successful man is someone who loves his children and wants to be a true guide to them by being that example, by paying attention to his children, by spending time with them and bringing out the best in them so that they can also go out there and become leaders in their own respect to do good things in this world. A successful man is someone who treats everybody, not just your group of people in your neighborhood, with respect, treats everyone with kindness and generosity, because he knows that we're all in the end children of God. And a successful man uses a lot of different tools to become successful. And one of the most important tools is that every day that person does an accounting of his actions and deeds and looks into himself to see what he has done right and what he's done wrong. He acknowledges his mistakes and he seeks to rectify his actions, to improve himself so that he can reach his true potential. There's a lot of other ways to describe a successful man, but I just want to give you guys a taste of it so we can get into it. Now, there's so many ways to start and discuss what a successful man is, and the goal of this class is not to just talk theories, but to really get into talking about having real tools that will get you there. So I thought about it, and from all the teachings that I read of Rabbi Arush, and as well as other sages, it's quite clear that God brought man in this world to basically create a home in this world, a dwelling in this home with a woman in complete marital bliss. Because only in the company of a woman, a wife, can you really strive to improve yourself. A man can only go so far alone before he runs out of things where he's really objective about himself. As we'll see in this class, a wife is so critical to a man improving himself and rectifying himself. So it's so important to know how to have a great marriage, because there's not a lot of great teachings out there about what really makes a great marriage. And what Rabbi Arush has done in his book, The Garden of Peace, is really groundbreaking. And it transformed my life so much that you could see it immediately, even after practicing it for a few months. It makes a huge impact in everything, from your relationship with your wife, the way you feel about yourself, your level of happiness, your enthusiasm to improve yourself, your relationship with other children, your career is better, everything is so much better, and you feel much closer to God. Only in marriage can someone truly understand what is selflessness. They can only truly understand what is patience, restraint of anger, also restraining your ego for the greater peace of the home. These are not things you can do alone. And I know that some of you here are not married, but I want to impress upon you that this should be the most important mission for you, is to find somebody. Even if you think that I'm not ready, I need to set up a situation, I need to get over this hump or this obstacle, that's not true. You can do everything in your life, achieve your career goals in unison with trying to find that soulmate. And as we're going to learn, that everything that we're going to talk about requires a lot of work. And it requires, the kind of work we're talking about is prayer. It's not the kind of prayer from a book. It's the kind of prayer where you're speaking to God in your own words. And so every day, I strongly encourage anyone that is not married to ask God to help you find that soulmate, to get you closer to that place. And those that are married, of course, it goes without saying that you should be praying every single day, for not just a few minutes, 10, 20 minutes, to have peace in your home. Because the peace in the home is the anchor for life. It's what brings happiness. It's what allows you to go out there and be your best self. A person who doesn't have happiness cannot have closeness to God. It's impossible. God created man and woman so that they can be together and together advance in life. And so, now that we've talked a little bit about why I decided to discuss this topic first, and we're going to talk about other topics, about how to go about a career, about also other things that include a successful man, but I feel it's so important that we talk about this, because when you have the understanding of how a true marriage works, you have 60% of the way already paved to success. Because success is different for each of us. It's not a numerical figure of making a lot of money. Each one of us has a different mission in this life, and it's to reach our full potential, whatever it is that God has in store for us. But to get there, we need that happy foundation. It's so critical because we've seen so many examples of men who have achieved material wealth, famous people, powerful people, and yet because they don't have marital happiness, their world crumbles as quickly as they built it. So, one of the very first pillars in having a peaceful home is the very idea that a man under no circumstance can criticize his wife. Not even a gentle, constructive criticism that he thinks will benefit his wife. It's not possible. And we're going to learn that because a woman's very vitality, her very life source stems from the respect, from the adoration, from the positivity that her husband gives to her. You can compare a man and a woman to the sun and the moon. The man is the sun, and when he radiates with a lot of light, the moon is very bright. But when a man decides that he wants to take the opposite route, which is the route of criticism and thinking that this is the way, his wife becomes dim. A man in this world, we have to understand that there are spiritual laws. God created this world in certain ways, and no matter what sense of logic and intellect you use, it's just not the way that you see it. And one of those things is that a woman is such that she cannot bear the idea of criticism. And many men fail in that area because they end up criticizing their wives. And they start out doing it with good intentions. They want to do it with good intentions because they want their wives to get better. They don't want them to make that mistake. So they say, hey, how is she going to get better? How is she going to improve? Everybody wants constructive criticism. I get it. I'm okay with it. But the thing is that a woman doesn't work like that. And there's a very, very, very amazing reason why God created women with such sensitivity to criticism that in many cases they would rather die than bear the idea of having this criticism around them. Rabbi Arush says that your wife is your exact mirror. And what does that mean? That means that when you see faults in your wife, in fact, she is mirroring to you, through God, your faults. So when you look at your wife and you see something about her that you don't like, it's because it's really a problem that is really in you. And your wife has really been brought to your life for that reason, to help you rectify your own shortcomings, your own weaknesses. And I'll give you an example. You have an angry wife. Many times the reason for that is because you have problems with anger. You have a wife that doesn't respect you because you're not respecting her. You have a wife that is dressed in an immodest way, talks to a lot of men. It's because you're spending your days looking at women on the street. You have a man who has too much ego and pride. So what does his wife do? She degrades him because that's what he needs. He needs someone to deflate his ego. Or sometimes a man who stares at many women, when he goes home, his wife is disgusted by him. So you see that a woman, your wife, is really a mirror for you. She really shows to you what you need to work on. And if you think about it, it's actually amazing. Through your wife, you can actually see what you need to fix in yourself. It's one of the greatest gifts that God has given to us, is this mirror. And you probably are wondering by now as well, how does a woman fix herself if I have to fix myself? Well, the interesting thing is exactly that. Because your wife is your mirror, when you seek to rectify yourself and improve yourself, she will automatically do the same. Now, in this seminar, you have to take a leap of faith. You have to have faith that these things, which sometimes cannot be explained by mere intellect, they really work. I can tell you, worked for me. Worked for me in an amazing way. You have to discard your intellect. You have to throw it far away. And you definitely can't listen to that voice in the back of your head, which is that evil inclination that tells you, no, this is ridiculous. Makes no sense. I'm doing all the work. She's doing nothing. No, this is the evil inclination that wants to do everything to make sure that you don't evolve, that you don't reach success, and you don't reach your full potential in life. This is what the evil inclination is. So, we realize now that we can't try to fix a wife's shortcomings by criticism. So how do we do it? What do you do when that happens? As you're going to learn, something that we're going to talk a lot about is this idea of a self-accounting, a self-analysis. Some people call it personal prayer. Other people call it bodhidut, seclusion, meditation, whatever you want to call it. But it's the idea of going to a quiet place every day and not around people, not in the middle of doing something else, and looking at your actions of that day. Looking at what happened the last 24 hours in your day, and admitting and doing that, knowing that you're there to have a conversation with God. It's a meeting with God. And in that meeting, you're going to talk about all these things. You're going to talk about what you did right, what you did wrong. You're going to thank God for the good things that happened to you that day. And then you're going to try to take a deep dive into looking at one attribute, one character flaw of yours. Let's say you have anger, and how you can go about fixing it. Now, it's going to take you more than one session, because these things, you can't take $5 investment and turn it into $1 million. It doesn't work. Same thing in spirituality. But as long as you know that you have to rely on God, you have to talk to God, because God is really the key to finding these solutions. So you may come home, for instance, and your wife acts a certain way, and you're trying to decipher, well, what did I do wrong? Well, I can tell you that in these sessions, if you do it consistently every day, hopefully you can do it for half an hour a day, you're going to see a lot of things that you never understood before. I've been doing it for 2 years, and I can tell you that the clarity that you develop about life is unbelievable. Because then you say to yourself, what was my life before I had this type of practice? It's like comparing a blind man to someone with Superman-like vision, can see through walls. It really is like that. And the great thing is that if you do it every day, it's a cumulative type of practice. It only gets better and better. And so, in these sessions, when you see certain things about your wife, then you'll realize, wow, it's really me. It's really me. And instead of focusing on what your wife needs to correct, you focus on yourself. And you know that you'll emerge a winner from that. Because when you work on yourself, you always improve. Now, Man, by nature, does not see his own faults. He tries to blur out the truth because it's so much more comfortable for him to say, everything's okay with me. There's nothing wrong with me. So, what does God do? God needs to send clear signals to that man to wake him up, to fix himself. And how does he do that? He does that through his wife. What does he do? He creates these seemingly out of proportion behaviors that seem out of proportion with what really is the issue. A lot of husbands come home, say one wrong word, and the wife just blows up. You know, say, what did I do? I just said one thing, I didn't mean it. Okay, well, what is this? Why is that? Because if you had a gentle, if God, for instance, in that example, let's say you have a problem of anger. If your wife displayed the same exact amount of anger that you actually have to work on and you're dealing with, you probably wouldn't notice that you have to deal with it. It's by creating these kinds of extreme reactions that it's like a wake-up call to you. And as you see, a lot of people change in life when they have big wake-up calls. And those are wake-up calls that come from God. Because if we were given these gentle reminders, we just would never feel impelled to make a change in our lives. So what he does is God shows this man through his wife, by magnifying her behaviors, what you need to work on, in the hope that you will wake up and work on yourself. So a lot of guys like to complain about their wives and their faults, but when you tell them that these faults that they're talking about are really internal deficiencies, that they're not willing to accept this. They're not willing to accept that they are actually the problem. And it shows that not only this man does not want to work on his own character traits and improve himself, but he can't even acknowledge his own faults. So that's a problem that we want to make sure that we overcome, because by nature, this is how we are created. And we have to fight that nature to improve ourselves. And as I said, this practice, this daily practice of self-analysis, where you actually are willing to be honest with yourself and say to God, you know, God, I know I have this anger issue. I know I have this issue of jealousy or greed, or I'm impatient, and you know, today I spoke to so-and-so in a really rude way, and I did this and I did that, but I really want to change it. I don't know how to do it. But the fact that you've arrived at this meeting with God and you're willing to say, hey, I can't fix this by myself. I need your help. Then God, in his mercy, brings that wisdom into your mind. And before you know it, if you're patient, you suddenly find a way to fix something that maybe all your life has plagued you. A problem that all your life you've had an issue with. A problem of depression, a problem substance abuse, a problem with, I don't know. Whatever it is. There's so many different problems that people have. But I've met so many people, and Rabbi Arush has books written about examples of people who've made full 180 degrees changes in their lives by just going out there and doing something that seems crazy to talk to God. But it's not crazy at all. Now you can talk verbally. You can talk in your mind if you want to do it. You can talk in a quiet room. You can do it in a forest. You can do it in the street. The point is to do it. To do it. This is the reason why people don't do it is because the evil inclination wants to do everything to stop you from doing it. Because man's greatest weapon in life is the ability to pray to God. The ability to pray and connect to their Father who has the keys to unlock your full potential and to lead you to success in life. So, with respect to the wife, when you decide to take upon you to make it a mission to have a happy marriage, and you realize that criticism is not the way to do it, but it's rather working on yourself And when you start actually doing this daily practice where you humble yourself and you talk about all your faults and you're not afraid of doing that, then you know what? You're not going to have such a bumpy road anymore. Because those wake-up calls that some people have every day say, oh man, so life is such a wreck. It's like a highway, things are hitting me from right and left. Why is that? It's because these are all signals that God is sending you, like wake up, wake up, wake up, return to me. You got to change your ways. You can be a better person. This is not what you're meant to be. But when someone starts doing a daily accounting and judges himself down here below, then up in the heavens, they don't judge him anymore. They don't need to like send him signals to wake him up. He's fully awake. He's there. He's holding at a very high level. A very high level of self-awareness and a high level of spirituality. And he knows he's very connected to God. And of course, I can tell you that when someone does that every day, he has a beautiful life with his wife. A beautiful life. And you can fix it. You can fix it. A lot of people come from very troubled marriages and start applying these kinds of practices, and their lives change overnight. They go from hating one another to suddenly loving one another and wanting to be together. They go from being on the path to divorce to suddenly getting back together. So, there's two choices. One, which is to kind of think you can use your own intellect and focus on the other person about what they need to fix instead of what you need to do. And instead of getting to work, you can do that. Or you can take the lazy road and say, you know what? This is ridiculous. And what happens? God sends him really, really huge signals. And sometimes it could be like a light smack on the face. Then before he gets a punch in the face through his wife. You know, and women can get very extreme in their behaviors. And that's not really them. It's God sending those behaviors through these wives, hoping that the man is going to rectify himself. And sometimes you see that in, you know, they serve their husbands with a restraining order or whatnot. These are all, you know, already starting to be extreme type of behaviors, or they scream at him all day. It's because you're not looking to look into yourself to fix yourself. Now, this is why the idea of this mirror is so important. The idea of looking at when you look at your wife and you see a flaw, you should take it to heart that this flaw is inside of you. And this type of mirror is given to us so that we can change ourselves. But this gift is only given to someone who's willing to humble his ego. It's only given to someone who really wants to change, someone who really wants to improve their ways, and someone who's willing to swallow his pride and get to work. But someone who's going to react in a violent way and get aggressive with his wife when she is coming down on him, he's not going to merit to even see this mirror behavior, because his wife will be too scared. She'll be too scared to tell him what she thinks, because she'll be afraid of that he'll have an outburst. So this is why when you start looking, when you get into a situation with your wife and you know that she's not happy with something, you need to listen, and then you need to go and do that self-accounting back in a corner somewhere and start confessing to God about the issues that you have in your own life. Now, this is not so simple in the beginning. When I first did it, I had like a laundry list of 150 things I wanted to talk about. So, you talk at one thing at a time, and you pick your biggest issue that you have with yourself, that many people probably told you have an issue with, but you never are willing to admit to it. And you say, God, I can't do this by myself. I know I got a problem. I want to fix it. From the moment you make this, you have this resolve to change yourself, you'll see you'll have a lot less opposition from your wife. Because God is the one who's behind your wife. So he's not going to need to use her to have this opposing force on you, because he sees that you're really making efforts to change yourself. Because God wants you to be happy. And if you're not happy, then he's not happy. So you can think also of your wife almost like a loudspeaker through which God is speaking to you, instead of just a mirror. So if your wife is screaming at you, imagine someone speaking to you through a speaker and cursing at you. Are you going to hit the speaker? Are you going to heat the speaker? I mean, what is that? That's ridiculous. It's the person behind it that is responsible for it. So you got to realize that sometimes your wife may act in a certain way. It's not even her. It's God behind her. He's the one who's causing her to do this, because he wants you, again, he wants you to come to this awareness that you need to change your ways. Here's an example. There's a man doing grocery shopping for his wife. He brings her a lot of bags of good food, and he comes home and he's spent a lot of time doing it, and she's totally upset with him. What happened here? Doesn't know. What did he do? He actually went out of his way to help her. Well, as I said, God is behind this. And he saw that while you were out doing the grocery shopping, while you were sizing up the tomatoes to make sure they're good, you were also looking at every woman in the aisles. So, when you came home, your wife doesn't. Does your wife know that you did that? No, but God knows. God knows that. So your wife sometimes does these inexplicable things because of that very thing. So if you're honest with yourself and you say, you know what? I don't want to look around. I want to only have eyes for my wife. Help me do this. Help me not look around. Help me just be happy with my lot in life. And you won't have these kinds of situations. As we'll learn in a future class, having eyes of purity is one of the biggest things for marital happiness. And so many men fail in this regard because they think that this is not an act of infidelity. It's normal. I'm on the street. It's not my fault. This person just walked by. It's not me. I just walked by. I happened to be there. I looked, okay, but come on. I love my wife. But when you do that, it's actually a grave, grave sin. And as Rabbi Arush, he has a book called The Garden of Purity. He talks about how to walk outside in the street. You don't need to look all around. You have your eyes downcast. You don't need to look all around you at every person walking by. If you have happiness, if you know God is in your life, you know you have a great wife, you have a great family, what do you need to look around for? What are you looking for? You've got everything. Stay focused. So this is just an example. This is an example of how these daily accounting sessions can really reveal that to you. You would never be able to make that connection that your wife was upset with you because you did this. But if you decide to take it upon yourself to spend that time and go through, well, what did I do? I woke up in the morning, I did this, I did that. Oh, I see what I did there. I messed up there. And suddenly you have this recognition that you did something wrong. When that situation comes again, you're going to be a lot more self-aware of yourself not to do it. Because people keep making the same mistake over and over because they have that lack of self-awareness and self-control. And that's because they think that on their own they can become better people. They can't. You need God with you all the time. You need to pray to God, God, I want to be an upright man. I want to be only focused on my wife. I want to be happy with what I have. I want to control my anger. I want to be happy. I don't want to do this. You need those prayers. They're so vital. If you don't have them, then you know what? You're like walking through life like a pinball, in a pinball machine, just like being knocked around from situation to situation, never really learning anything from it, and repeating the same pattern. So a truly successful man is somebody who is committed on a daily basis to look at himself truthfully and do it with the help of God. Because in those sessions, someone was to say, let's say someone doesn't believe in God and says, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to apply the theories of such and such philosopher to arrive at the same deep introspection where I will realize all this stuff. I don't need God. He will not reach that. There's no doubt he won't reach it. There's no way. Can't do anything in this world without God. The second you enlist the help of God, you can rise above obstacles that you think would never even, that there's no way I can go over them. You'd look at yourself a year from now, you're like, whoa, look at this distance I made. I can't believe it. And this is exactly the feeling that I can tell you for myself that I feel. And I'm not even doing this so long, 2 years. So I can imagine someone who's doing this for years. They've probably traveled the world 10 times already in what they've done. I mean, it's so easy. And yet it's so hard for people to do it. But I'm going to give you more reasons to think why you really need this, why this is indispensable in your life, why you really need to do it. So we'll go back to the reasons why criticism is poison for your marriage. We learned that a woman's source of life is from respect and the attention she gets from her husband. When you cut that off, it's like cutting her air supply. A woman by nature needs words of encouragement, praise, warmth. She needs someone who tells her about her good points. Now imagine what happens when a wife is criticized. To her, everything is magnified. She immediately thinks she can't improve. She thinks she's worthless. She thinks she feels like that. She's completely unloved. And so what happens? Instead of you hoping that a constructive criticism will help her improve, she falls into despair and hopelessness. So you didn't win anything here. She loses all her energy and desire to change for the better. Secondly, women by nature can never admit to any wrongdoing. So no matter what you're going to say, she'll always deny that it's her fault. So when you criticize her, you'll gain nothing. Because she'll do whatever it takes to not reduce her self-worth even further by admitting that you're right. Even when you're right. Women also, and everybody actually by extent, suffers from a big problem, which is self-persecution. We're our worst critic. And women have this problem to a very acute level. A lot of them, they usually feel like something's not right about them, that they're not doing enough, maybe with the kids or whatever it is, that they're not good enough, that they're not pleasing their husbands enough. So when a husband criticizes his wife, she's already prone to having this self-doubt. She's already having this is already inborn in her. So that brings her even lower, brings her to such a diminishment of her self-worth. It makes her really depressed. And in some cases, it may cause a woman to have to seek psychiatric care from the mental and emotional damage she suffers from that. Now, so if we have to do all the work, if we have to do all this daily accounting every day, and by the way, this daily accounting is something that should be done by women too. It's not something that's limited to men. But your evil inclination is going to say this to you all the time. Well, how does she change? How does she change? That's a valid question. I mean, after all, every normal person needs to have some kind of feedback. Your evil inclination will tell you. I mean, is she God? Is she perfect? Everyone who's normal is happy when someone gives them a critique. It's for their own good. Also, I love my wife. This is all the evil inclination. This is all that voice in the back of your mind that's trying to trip you up is telling you. They're going to tell you, you love your wife. How can you let her repeatedly make the same mistake every day? How about just one gentle little criticism, just one little gentle thing? Just one little thing, and she won't do it anymore. Case closed, we move on, happy, peaceful life, and we move on. I mean, how can I, if I love her, how can I say nothing about the harm she may be causing herself, or to the family, the children, or whatever? But as we know, this is very flawed thinking, because we just said that criticism is the poison for a woman. So what does the husband do in such a... This is a scenario that plays out every day in marriages, every single day. He gets self-righteous and he thinks he's about to do a majorly good act, when in reality, as soon as he tells his wife this critique, her soul crushes. She becomes negative, she feels she's worthless. She loses all her energy. She has no strength at all to want to improve herself. And also, because of her nature, to never admit to her wrong ways, she'll do anything to fight you to the death and not say, you're right, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. Because for her, she'd rather being wrong is worse than death. She'll do anything to prevent this scenario from happening. Just like someone who's being strangled, they'll gasp for as much oxygen as they can get. So women will not do that. So the husband gets further riled up by his evil inclination and says, oh wow, what a wife I have. She has so much pride, so much ego. And he gets more and more angry, and he finds more and more faults in his wife. And so he tells her even more things. And she again gets even more depressed. She might start doing unbelievable things. This is what happens in so many marriages, where at some point someone folds, God forbid, divorce, or the opposite. They become lifeless in their own marriages. They become resigned to this existence. They're just in the marriage, but are not really in it. And of course, what happens all around? The family, the kids, your career, everything goes down with the house, losing that peace. This is why this idea of marital happiness is so core to everything. A person, and I've met many successful men who say they have a very unhappy marriage. They make huge deals, business deals, and they just don't get any joy out of it. So what is the point of having an amazing career alongside a bad marriage? You lose the taste for everything. Family gatherings are a nightmare. Children and parents don't talk to each other. Anyway. So, did the man gain anything from giving this so-called constructive criticism to his wife? Did he gain anything? Obviously not. Quite the opposite. The opposite cycle occurred and destroyed the entire house. So, as we said before, when a man sees that he sees a lot of faults in his wife, it should serve as an awakening to go and work on himself. Because when he does that, obviously he's on the road to a peaceful marriage and to a life that is amazing. Amazing. Now, the right way of approaching a marriage consists of two strategies. One is to look at your wife's faults and from there know what you need to fix. But then there's another strategy to use at the same time. And instead of looking for the faults in your wife, look for the good points. Look for the good points in your wife. Now, this is a concept that's very famous, and it's brought down by Rabbi Nachman of Breslev, that you must judge everyone favorably. And even if someone is utterly wicked, with not even an ounce of goodness, you have to dig deep, deep, deep to find something good in them. Because when you do that, just by looking at someone in your mind, without even saying anything, if you find some small worth, some small good point in them, then there's a transfer of this kind of spiritual energy that somehow lifts that person up. So that person who's very low suddenly feels like they have encouragement to get better. Why is that? Because when we judge someone else favorably, it awakens God to also judge that person favorably. So, this is an indisputable law of creation. This idea of when you look at someone favorably and look for their good points, that it benefits them greatly. And that's why in the converse, if you look for the bad points in people, a certain person, you're actually causing judgments to come upon him from God that basically bring them lower, even lower than they were before, which is why it's such an important work. And this is a whole other discussion as part of, being a successful person, successful man who treats everyone fairly and kindness, is to look for the good points in every single person. So you see a person and you immediately judge them in your mind, this guy's this, that. Try to flip the switch, flip the dialogue in your mind. Like, wow, no, this guy seems like he was a total thug or a total this, but you know what, there's something good about him. The fact that he came here today, joined us, wow, there's something positive about him. There's so many things like that. So in a marriage, the role of the husband is to make his wife constantly happy. And the wife's happiness comes entirely from the husband seeing the good points in her and praising her for her goodness, praising her for her inner and outer beauty. The man's job is to give his wife this constant and daily compliments, positive reinforcement, and to focus on the good, not on the flaws. And what happens when a man does that? When a man focuses on the good in his wife, suddenly the wife starts to feel uncomfortable about staying in the place that she is in her life. She wants to make a change. She gets that energy from her husband, and she wants to improve herself. And without you needing to say a thing, you don't need to even say a word to your wife about what she needs to fix. Suddenly, things that you wish she could change, poof, they change, because she starts thinking about, all day long, starts thinking, what is it that my husband likes? What is my husband's will? What does he want me to be? And she starts to put all her energies to becoming that person, because she goes on this process of her own self-discovery to improve all aspects of her life. And that's amazing. All you have to do is to look at her good points. And that works actually for any relationship. Any relationship in which you look at the good points in that person will only flourish. And you don't even need to tell that person anything. And they will improve themselves, because they will feel that energy. They will feel that energy that you're giving their way. And you're doing them a tremendous kindness, because when you think good of someone, and certainly God thinks good of that person too. And imagine in the opposite ways. If you do the opposite, obviously, with an evil eye. So she musters all her strength to try to improve herself. And before you know it, you have a wife who's actually exactly what you always hoped. And you didn't even need to fight her with criticisms of any sort. So you're a winner in two ways. One, whenever you see a bad point in her, you know that it's a wake-up call for you. And you need to go and work on yourself. And then the second thing, by looking at the good points in your wife is filled with so much love and admiration for you that she gathers all her strength to improve herself and to do everything to be good in your eyes. So before you know it, there's no conflicts. Everybody's pretty much with the program without needing to speak to each other about it. You don't need to have these major conferences between husband and wife about your pros and cons and big plans on how you need to fix yourself. Each one does his own work. And who's behind it? It's God. God's behind it all. It sounds too good to be true, but it's not. It really isn't. And I can tell you from real life stories of people I know and from having practiced what I preach. And I think it's worth trying because the benefits are limitless. The benefits are limitless, and the effort compared to the benefits is nothing. It's nothing. Who doesn't want happiness? Everybody does. But if you want that happiness, you got to do that work. And you got to suspend your intellect and just go with it. So anyway, now I wanted to open it up to any kind of questions that people have. There's it's enough for today. I don't want to get into another topic. But who's got a question? Yes.
So, especially in our Western society where work is such an important thing for women, that they're not just mothers, there's so much more of a career for them. And whether they're an actress or a singer or whatever it is they do, and they come to you for advice, let's say that they're a singer, and they say, and you're working with them on something, and if they're offbeat or you ask them to do it in a different way, is there a line at which you can give advice that's somewhat constructive criticism?
Is this your wife though?
I mean, if it's your wife and you work with her, or
okay.
So it's not my personal wife, but I assume that when I have a wife,
okay,
that there will be a certain collaboration and things, and any kind of art form or work or.
Okay. Yeah. So the question is, if you happen to be, let's say, an artist, and you happen to work with your wife, is it, or is it just a female colleague? That's a different thing.
No, let's say it's your wife and you happen to work with her in some form of art.
Okay. Form. Well, I actually happen to work with my wife, so I can speak for myself. Okay? A lot of people say that's, a lot of people say, wow, it's not a good idea. But I can tell you that when you have peace in the home and you practice what we discussed in the home, everything just flows. It really just flows. And how would I handle that situation? Because I used to work with my wife before I knew all this stuff, years ago. And there was a collision. It didn't work out. Then again, now I work with her after having learned these important concepts, and there's no collision at all. And the reason for that is because things just work out themselves. And I actually, before I started working with my wife again, when I was doing my session with God, I said, please help me have a great relationship with my wife at work, and never to say anything in a way that will make her feel that she's personally being critiqued. But I can tell you that I never ended up having a situation like that.
You never get in a situation where she left something out of a contract, or there's something that maybe you need to point out that something didn't get done, or that there's something that needs to be done different, or there was a spelling mistake or anything like that?
Well, it depends also on the magnitude of the situation.
Right.
But I think in a very healthy relationship,
Uh-huh.
she will probably become aware of that mistake on her own.
Interesting.
I think so. And if she doesn't, and if it's such a big thing, say, maybe next time we can do it this way. It will be better for us,
So you are allowed to say that?
Yeah. I mean, criticism is, this is not, this is a unique situation. I don't, I haven't had this situation personally. The books of Rabbi Arush, this scenario was not discussed, but in my opinion, when you have God as your quarterback, you'll find the right way to do it. That where it will come from a warm heart that doesn't seek to put down the other person. People who criticize their wives that don't have this knowledge are doing it really for egotistical reasons, because they want to be right. Here, you're not trying to be right. Huh?
They want to be what?
Right.
They just want to be right. They want to be the one, they think that they're perfect and the other person's the one who needs to work. And they don't want to look into themselves, into what they need to work on. Here, it's a work thing. It's a technical situation. In a very healthy marriage, I don't think that scenario will cause, a lot of static between the two.
Okay.
Let's say you say the wrong thing, and your wife said, so she'll say, I didn't like it how you said it. So how would you think? So you say, how do you think I should have handled it? So she'll tell you. You say, okay, you know what? That makes sense. That's it. But there's a dialogue. There's a dialogue that's positive. We're trying to be, we're trying to learn from this, and that's the thing. It's not, these things, even when you have this, it's never smooth sailing. You're always going to have new obstacles, new things you need to learn, new things, things where you fall. Otherwise there's no growth. That's so, but you have to always, when you pray every day, some amount of time, God, you know how important it is that I make my wife happy. You know how important it is to me that I know everything that I have in my life is due to having this happy marriage. I say that all the time. I have this career, I have these wonderful children, I have happiness because I work on having a happy marriage, and I know that's the reason. It's not because I'm the greatest guy in the world.
Sure.
So when you speak like that to God in such humility, He's going to help you in those situations find the right words and take the right action so that these things don't create a lot of problems. And when you build a huge reservoir of positivity with your wife, she's not going to flip out, because as I said, the only times that women have magnified out of proportion behaviors is when God is trying to give you a real wake-up call, because you're completely out of touch with what you need to work on. He'll give you a gentle reminder, but that's it. Won't need to do something crazy where your wife blows up, I'm leaving, find yourself another singer,
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Okay. It's very nice. In some level that if you want to open up, since you say you worked with your wife before, and the things it wasn't going as smooth as it is right now, what was the conflict that you could share with us, if you can share? If you can share.
Okay.
You-
Okay,
you-
I mean,
you
the
understand
typical-
what I'm saying?
The typical conflicts that happen when a husband and wife work together is where they feel like they're stepping on each other's toes, or someone is trying to assume authority, or someone is trying to give, like he said, let's say someone made a mistake and you need to tell them about how to change it, or you want to train them to do something differently. and they take it the wrong way. So you start having conflict. I mean, that to me is the most frequent form of conflict. But again, working with your wife is not any, I mean, when you have a happy marriage, working with your wife is not a big deal. It can be actually, I mean, for me, it's actually a great thing because I get to actually speak to my wife more.
No, it's not that, it's good. You have a partner that you can trust, you have everything is good. But I want to, somehow if you have some kind of, any conflict that you have that you could share with us, that you can learn from it way before, not right now. Thanks God, everything is going good. But something.
I mean, it was, I don't really remember very well. I mean, to be honest, it's not, it's just regular things. I mean, it's just,
yeah, it's a regular thing, but, that always we can learn from it, in some...
I'll try to remember it, but right now, let's...
Okay.
Let's focus on the class.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I mean to...
No, it's fine. It's absolutely fine.
We learn by others' mistakes that they did and how they fix it, and all that, that's what it is.
Well, I think that the major way to fix any situation is just by what I was discussing. It doesn't matter whether you work with your wife or you don't. It doesn't matter whether, it doesn't really matter. There's so many different scenarios. It's all the same elements for success in your marriage. And it's not from the wrong situation that you're going to learn about it. It's from about how to go about marriage itself. And, when people work together, when people go through life not speaking to God to give him success at every point, then they get random results. But when you go through any situation, whatever it is, and you actually speak to God and pray for that to work out, then it's a whole different way of looking at things. It's a whole different way of relating to what's happening to you in your life. So no matter what the challenge, and this is nothing, there's much greater challenges in life that people go through in marriage. As long as you enlist the help of God, it's just completely different than if you just try to solve the problem using your own intellect. And that's really the big difference between those two situations.
But if you're putting it, husband and wife separate, you look at it, you get another partner. It's the two guys, they working together. Looking at the good things, to see the good things in another. You try to go and make it safe. For example, you try to go and say, and you have friends, you go and tell them, I have this one. You talk to them to come. And the other guy, he just push the people away. What? Not in one time, 2 times, 3 times. What you do? What do you recommend? In a relationship, not husband and wife. It's the 2 guys.
Okay, so this is a different question, but
yeah.
How about I talk to you afterwards, because this is not really the context of the class. We'll talk about it separately off camera. So who's got any questions about? Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to first tell you guys, Ariel, I know him, and this isn't something he's just trying to say and teach. I've seen big developments and big growth with him, that he's this is who he is. Like he's saying this. I've seen big change in his life in the past 2 years too, in his spirit, in his character, and also just also wanted to say, Yosef, when I heard that question, I was kind of thinking like, the stuff he's teaching about too. The reason that Ariel knows what he's saying, that he's doing it, is that he's consistent with it. It's not just one time he went to God and said, make everything perfect. It's even to this day, he's probably going to leave and go do an hour talking to God. It's a constant work of art where you develop this relationship with God in your life, that you're a partner with him, that you're going to get through. And doing these talks that he's talking about, it's like you start finding the answer inside yourself, if that makes any sense. And you start seeing it more and more, where it's not about the other person, it's really about you. But I can't speak on that because I'm not even married, so that marriage is a whole nother problem.
I did change. It's not about the husband and wife, because we see the good in anybody, we see and admire anybody that we see your partner, that you are working with him 8-9 hours a day, or might be more, you spend times together. That's what I was trying to get some answer.
I had
But after work, after the class,
Okay.
my quick question was, I'm trying to think, because like, for a guy that's single, you're trying to find someone in a sense, so you do have, there's a level of like guarding your eyes in a sense, but also you want to be physically attracted to the person that you're with,
Mm-hmm.
So in those situations, how do you apply this without, I don't know how to word it really. How do you apply this without
Do it.
do you know where I'm going with it?
You mean as a single person, how do you find a person that you're attracted to without looking at them?
It's kind of deep, because the one that's really that Hashem has for you, if you're looking at the wrong one, it can affect the one that really Hashem wants for you. But you might not even know that person yet. So how do you go about, you want to guard your eyes, but you also want to look for the right one in a sense.
So the question is, this is not really this is not this class topic exactly, because I said like this whole idea, it's talked a lot about in the book of Rabbi Arush called The Garden of Purity, which is the idea of the importance of guarding your eyes. Because guarding your eyes is critical to being able to have pretty much the power of prayer is pretty much it's impaired when you are looking around and lewd images or women,
I'm not
and
talking
having
about that.
right. So I know. So you're saying, how do you go about being a single man who wants to find your soulmate without looking around?
Yeah,
Now,
because you have to, in a sense.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. The thing is, you don't have to look around every single moment you're outside. Most of the times, finding the right one is not going to happen when you're driving your car or walking on the street. Looking around and you see an attractive woman, that's not going to happen. So
For sure.
the idea of looking around in that situation doesn't apply. But if you are presented to some person that someone recommended and said, I think you guys could make a great match, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with looking at them. What I was talking about was, we were talking in the context of a married man. A married man, like I said, a lot of people think that what happens on the street, or let's say you turn on your computer and or you watch a commercial or watch a movie and there's some images of other women that it's not your fault. It's just there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is really a different. This is like a.
Yeah, I see what you're
You know, this is like the master's course. You know, we're like on the bachelor degree level trying to understand that, but on a deeper level,
I'm just trying
when
to
you start-
apply it in a
when
way
you start
that
protecting your
you're single
eyes from those situations, you see that there's a greater holiness to the bond between you and your wife. There's a greater commitment because there's no way anyone can say that they see some picture on the street and these images don't affect you. They do. They have an effect. And if you will make a conscious effort to avoid looking at these things, before you know it, those things disappear from you, and you don't even have this kind of inner temptation, because we have to realize that man has this kind of inborn flaw in them, that they have to fight that. You know, this whole, the evil inclination associated with lewdness and sexuality is a real thing. But I know you're not talking about
Not
that.
at all,
But if
not
you're
at all.
talking about, okay, so you're
I'm
talking.
just talking about like a basic physical. You want a basic physical attraction to any guy.
I
to
don't
the
think
woman
I
that
don't
he's
think
with.
there's anything wrong with that. Again, I mean, the criteria by which you choose a wife. Again, this is something to discuss with God. That I want a wife that I will love on the inside and out. That's it. I mean, it's nothing wrong with that. But you know, once you go into that attitude that God is gonna chance you upon the right person, then whoever that person is, whatever that definition of beauty that they have, will be the right one for you. I mean, it's not. There's nothing wrong with that. I was talking about a totally different scenario.
I know. I'm just trying
Yeah.
to
But yeah,
apply
I
it
mean,
in a way in my life.
I mean, this question, you know, for single people is, it's a whole different thing. But I wanted to say that anybody who's watching or here, sitting here and saying, well, I'm single, do I really need to worry about all these technical issues with marriage right now? And I'll tell you this, it's like flying a plane. You know, you don't just like jump on and learn as you go. It's best to train for it, and when you train for it well ahead of time, it becomes second nature to you. That by the time you do come into that scenario of marriage, you're going to be so ahead of the game that you will not encounter the huge crises that people have that don't have this preparation.
That's the answer right there. Okay.
And that's
Yeah.
something that you don't do 30 days out from a marriage or 60 days out. You do it right now, because the idea should be is that if I'm of eligible age, I should find my soulmate right now, because they're the ones who are going to complete me. Because I just told you that you can't have a soul correction in this world without your soulmate. A man cannot achieve that level on their own. You know, there were like very pious men in the history that merited to be the Messiah, but they weren't because they never got married.
Wow.
Or they didn't have, so they never understood really the concept of selflessness. They didn't understand the concept of, reining in on their anger, or, being patient, things like that. That only a married person can do. So, this is, and we're going to get into, as we get into this, it's not going to be just about marriage, but I thought it was very important to start with that, because so many things in life are so connected to it. And all the blessings that a man gets, career, success, stem from marriage. Even Rabbi Arush said it himself. Show me your home, and I'll tell you how close and how spiritually, what your spiritual level is. What he's trying to say is that someone who's holding on a high spiritual level has bliss in their home, happiness in their home. It's not possible to have it otherwise. Because only someone who has faith in God knows that the real service of God begins in the home. Because when you know how to submit your nature for the happiness of another person, then you know what it is to actually be in the service of God. This is exactly the service of God. Putting your intellect aside and going with pure faith towards God. So, in future classes we're going to talk about pretty much things that are pertinent to any kind of person, how to deal with crisis, how to overcome problems, how to, overcome despair, how to achieve happiness. I mean, we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about, how to establish, how a healthy career should be. What is the makings of that in the framework of Rabbi Arush's teaching. I just wanted to open up with this, and probably for the next few classes we'll be talking about it. But after that, we'll be talking about these other topics.
Okay. So I have two questions. The first one, just yes or no is cool. Does in the book, in the Garden of Purity, does he talk about for single men, or it just comes straight to married men?
He has actually a book that is only for single men, and he has a book for married men. Before it was just one book, and I remember now it's like he wrote a book which is the Garden of Purity for single men.
Got it. Okay, great.
He has a book. I mean, I have the books here, so you can check it out. I don't know if I have the one for the single man, but honestly, they're very, the concepts do apply,
Well, it's very useful for preparation for when the time comes. Like, I can absolutely see the value, as well as the value in what to look for in a wife, and and how to treat even your girlfriend. So I can definitely see the value there. The second question I had was, and I think there's a little bit of confusion for me on the difference between, like, what is criticism versus advice versus pointing something out that needs to be pointed out. Can you define criticism?
So, in Rabbi Arush's teachings, even these kind of gentle advices that you want to give are discouraged.
So do you bite your tongue when the time comes? Like, if you want to point something out, or you wish that she did something a little different, or?
Like, for instance, let's say you don't like a certain piece of furniture that your wife bought.
Sure.
For the greater good, if she's happy, then you're happy.
And if she asks you for advice, you just say, I don't know, or do you like this one or this one? Like,
oh no, if she asks you a question, it's a different thing. If a wife asks you a question, this is not like a relationship of fear of expression, it's not like
right.
You're not going to say, but when you look at what is truly important, and the attribute of peace is the greatest thing you can have. When you know that peace is the greatest common denominator that you're seeking, then you say to yourself, do I really care about the color of this couch as much as my wife's happiness? And if my wife is happy, then I'm happy, because we're both half souls. We're both together make one soul. Do I really care about that? You probably wouldn't. Because the reason why people become sensitive to certain superficial things like that, it's because they don't really have happiness. Someone who's happy is just flowing with it. Those kinds of things don't matter to them really as much. They don't. It's when you don't have that, then little things can get to you. At least that's what I think. This exact scenario was not discussed in the books per se, but like I said, Rabbi Arush talks all the time about the importance of peace, and how someone who seeks to have peace with other people is someone who gets very close to God, as opposed to someone who causes fights between people. Someone's very far from God. So always the action that promotes peace is an action that is the favorable one, as opposed to the other one.
Aaron,
Huh? Aaron, exactly. Aaron the Cohen, exactly. Aaron the Cohen he was loved by everyone because he pursued peace at all costs, even at the cost of his own, at his own whatever. Like he would be willing to go on a limb to to have peace. Okay, so we'll be back in 2 weeks on Thursday again, and we'll continue to the next chapters of the Garden of Peace, and maybe we'll, if you guys want, we can delve into discussing actually how to do it, how to do this daily session. Maybe we can go out there and actually do it.
Yeah, I'd be very curious.
I mean,
about that stuff.
in the end, everything we're talking about here, unless you don't do this kind of daily accounting, this daily personal prayer, it stays in theory. I mean, you can read all the books you want about wanting to come close to God and about wanting to be happy and about wanting to know all the how to become enlightened. But in the end, you'll get nowhere. It will just stay a level of theory. It's only, and I've learned it from when you go in those sessions and you start chewing on those ideas and you start looking at yourself, that's when you start seeing results. Reading these books, just in reading them, it's not going to do anything. And honestly, some people say, do I need to read a book about how to go to talk to God? I said, no, just go out there and do it. Just literally, just go out there and stand there. First few times, you might stutter, you might not be able to say anything. But before you know it, God in His mercy will facilitate it for you to speak to Him and to suddenly open up and start talking. I mean, people go and talk to psychiatrists all the time. And the psychiatrist is paid. Here, you don't even have to pay for it. You can talk to God anytime you want. Any place, anywhere. I mean, to me, that's the best deal we can have in this life. So I really recommend it. And again, we'll get back together again in 2 weeks. And thank you very much again.
Thank you for your time.